25% import duty on Indian goods announced by US President Donald Trump is set to take effect on Thursday. And among the major sticking points in the ongoing trade tensions between the two sides is agriculture, specifically genetically modified seeds, imports of which the United States has been lobbying India to allow for decades. And on Gravitas tonight, we are breaking down for you why genetically modified seeds hold huge political stakes for Donald Trump, why American monopolistic ambitions and the country's aggressive push to enter the Indian agricultural sector are a major factor behind this, and why this entire issue risks giving foreign control over what millions of Indians grow. According to reports, in a bid to appease his voter base, especially those in America's agricultural heartlands, Donald Trump is leaning hard on countries like India to open their markets. American states like Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, rich in corn, soy and wheat reportedly form the backbone of his support. At a time when Trump's approval rating has dropped to just around 40%, the lowest level of his second term in office, by the way, Trump needs to keep his voters happy. So what better way, it seems, than by expanding the export markets of a crucial voter base? And now the Trump administration has been exerting pressure on India to open up its market, especially to American soybean and maize, which are both almost entirely genetically modified produce. And these products are reportedly backed by powerful US farming lobbies and multinational corporations. And the numbers indicate why it is so important for American agricultural businesses. The exports of American raw soybean alone was valued at around $25 billion and of maize at around $14 billion in 2024. And if processed derivatives are added, the total exceeds $50 billion. But this is not just about trade, it's also about power and patents. According to reports, American companies have been looking to dominate Indian agricultural markets with the aim of gaining exclusive rights to seeds and crops. India is not new to the issue, of course. The infamous basmati rice patent controversy had a US firm trying to claim ownership over a variety of rice that has been grown in India for centuries. And that attempt was blocked. But India remains wary of American companies. New Delhi has consistently refused to approve genetically modified food crops for commercial cultivation or widespread import. GM crops pose risks to biodiversity and, above all, farmer autonomy, because genetically modified products are often patented, potentially leaving Indian farmers dependent on US corporations for every planting season. But India is not yielding. In fact, the government is aware that any compromise on genetically modified imports could harm millions of small farmers, especially given that both maize and soybean are cultivated in more than 12 million hectares of land each in India. Another issue of giving any kind of leeway is that cheaper US produce could potentially flood Indian markets and decimate local competition. And the concerns are not merely about imports. It's reportedly also about handing over control of Indian farmlands to American corporate interests. As India continues to engage in high-stakes trade talks with America, the time for the implementation of trade tariffs gets closer, and India has drawn a clear line. The onus continues to remain on Trump and his administration. Shifting focus for now, Australia has taken a major step towards strengthening its naval firepower. As tensions escalate in the Indo-Pacific, the Australian government has signed a multi-billion-dollar agreement with Japan for a fleet of next-generation warships. And it's a clear signal, it seems, that regional powers are preparing for a long-term standoff with China. Australia is set to acquire 11 advanced Mogami-class frigates from Japan's Mitsubishi Heavy Industries in a deal worth $6 billion. And it's the most significant defense agreement ever signed between the two sides. Australia's defense minister says the warships already in service with Japan's maritime self-defense force are equipped with stealth technology and long-range missile systems that are tailor-made for Australia's future warfare needs. Listen to this.
Clearly the biggest defence industry agreement that will ever have been struck between Japan and Australia. In fact, it's really one of the biggest defence exports that Japan has ever engaged in. And as I say, it is a very significant moment in our bilateral relationship.
The next generation vessels will feature 32 vertical launch cells, advanced radar systems, electro-optical sensors, sonar, helicopter support facilities. They will also carry Type 17 anti-ship missiles and operate with a crew of just 90 personnel. This modernization will basically see Australia's major warship fleet grow from 11 to 26 over the next decade, as the country pivots towards long-range strike capabilities in response to China's expanding naval reach. Elsewhere in the region, Taiwan conducted its largest ever war games last month, remember. The Han-Kuang exercises tested the island's resilience against a potential Chinese invasion, with 22,000 reservists participating and live-fire drills featuring US-made HIMARS rocket systems, Abrams tanks, and Taiwan's own Sky Sword air defense missiles. The focus was basically on decentralized command structures, a tactic designed to maintain combat effectiveness even if communications are disrupted. The drills also assessed Taiwan's combat readiness against a full-scale attempt to seize the island. Japan is also ramping up its own defenses. The Japan Ground Self-Defense Force launched a surface-to-ship Type 88 missile from Hokkaido Island, marking the first time Japan conducted surface-to-ship missile tests within its territory. In fact, until now, such exercises were held in the United States bases due to cost and logistical constraints. This new approach allows Japan to train more troops at home and reflects Tokyo's view of China as its most serious security threat in the region. Across the Asia-Pacific nations are not just watching China's rise, they are actively preparing to counter it. Shifting focus now to Gaza, as Palestinians are running out of shrouds for the dead. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu seems to be gearing up to fully occupy the Palestinian enclave, reportedly. And it's a move that even his own military commanders warn could cost more lives, prolong the war, and endanger the Israeli hostages still held inside the enclave by Hamas. According to Israeli media, this plan would see Israeli troops entering every remaining part of Gaza, including areas where hostages are believed to be held. It's a strategy that is reportedly opposed by the IDF's own chief of staff, Eyal Zamir. But Netanyahu does not care, it seems. According to Israeli media reports, Netanyahu has told ministers that if the chief of staff does not agree, he should resign. The Israeli military already controls about 75% of the now besieged Palestinian territory, and now the push is for total conquest, reportedly. On the ground in Gaza, though, bodies are piling up faster than they can be buried. On Monday and Tuesday alone, over 65 people were killed, many while waiting near aid distribution sites. On Tuesday, 26 people were killed by Israeli gunfire and airstrikes, reportedly, including 14 who were waiting near an aid distribution site.
We are forced to. We want to feed our children. I have young children. How am I supposed to feed them? No one has mercy. This resembles the end of the world. It's every man for himself. If we fight, we get the food. If we don't fight, we don't get anything.
Still, I will continue to go to the aid distribution points. Hasn't my son gone? Yet I will keep going, even though I reject those distribution points, even though I reject the aid shipments. But hunger is killing me and my children.
Scenes of desperation, chaos, death emerging from on the ground in Gaza, civilians climbing onto moving aid trucks, fighting for food, some shot, some trampled upon, it seems. The war has seen the death of more than 60,933 Palestinians. Famine is spreading. Hostage families are pleading for a ceasefire. And what about Netanyahu? He says defeat of Hamas remains his only goal. Listen to this.
It is necessary to complete the defeat of the enemy in Gaza, to free all our hostages and to ensure that Gaza will no longer pose a threat to Israel.
But Netanyahu is under pressure on several fronts. Domestically, the families of the 49 remaining Israeli hostages in Gaza are demanding a ceasefire so their loved ones can come home finally. And around the world, humanitarians are pushing for a ceasefire to allow in food for the starving people. Several European capitals, in fact, have announced plans to recognize Palestinian statehood despite fierce US and Israeli opposition. Meanwhile, Netanyahu's far-right allies in his ruling coalition want to seize the opportunity of the war to reoccupy Gaza and tighten control of the occupied West Bank. In fact, Israeli foreign minister was in New York, where Israel's US ally was helping organize a UN Security Council meeting to focus the world's attention on the fate of the hostages. But behind closed doors, Israel's security cabinet is deeply divided. On one side, Netanyahu, far-right ministers, hardline generals pushing for occupation. On the other, the chief of staff, the Mossad chief, Israel's foreign minister, who says the focus should be on a ceasefire and hostage deal. General Zamir even cancelled the US trip, in fact, citing the gravity of the situation. And as the Israeli cabinet prepares to make one of the most consequential decisions of the war, the cost of Netanyahu's decision is being paid by the civilians on both sides, by the starving Palestinian families already scrambling for crumbs, and by extending the time for the emaciated hostages still trapped in Gaza. A long-awaited conclusion in one of the most haunting deep-sea disasters in recent history has now come. The US Coast Guard has found that inadequate design was a primary cause behind the tragic implosion of the Titan submersible, which, remember, killed all 5 people on board in 2023. The Titan, operated by US-based company OceanGate, was on a tourist dive to the wreckage of the Titanic, the legendary ship that sank in 1912. But just hours into its descent, the submersible lost contact. Its shattered remains were found 4 days later, scattered on the ocean floor. Just 1,600 feet from the Titanic's bow, the newly released 300-page report from the U.S. Coast Guard's Marine Board of Investigation confirms what many feared, that this tragedy was preventable. The chair of the U.S. Coast Guard Marine Board of Investigation has said that the submersible's design failed to meet important safety standards and that more robust oversight is urgently needed, especially for experimental vessels operating beyond current regulations. OceanGate, remember, suspended operations after the tragedy. The report is damning, especially about Stockton Rush, who was the CEO of OceanGate and one of the victims in the tragic incident. The report says Rush essentially held several roles: CEO, safety officer, and even the subs pilot, giving him unchecked control over Titan's operations. And in the aftermath of the disaster, investigators say he was so focused on managing the expectations of his wealthy guests and that he compromised their safety, as per the report. Remember, each seat on Titan cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and that created a lot of pressure. Rush himself had publicly described the Titan as an experimental vehicle. At the heart of the risk was the submersible carbon fiber hull, a material that never before used at these depths. Unlike steel or titanium, carbon fiber cannot handle prolonged deep sea pressure. Its layers are known to separate under stress, and yet the Titan was built with layer upon layer of it. The submersible also had titanium domes at both ends, raising engineering red flags. According to experts, mixing metal and carbon fiber creates materials that react differently under compression, and that means stress points and weak spots. And there were several other warnings, some pretty serious ones. In 2022, on its 80th dive, there was a loud bang. The US Coast Guard now believes that was the sound of the carbon fiber starting to delaminate, which basically means it was beginning to come apart. But instead of halting the mission, reportedly, the dive continued.